The jeepney's engine rattled like an old man's cough as it crawled through Manila's mid-morning traffic. Inside the cramped vehicle, bodies pressed together in the humid heat. A woman with shopping bags overflowing with vegetables. A construction worker still dusty from his night shift. Students in crisp white uniforms chattering about weekend plans. And tucked against the grimy window, Minho, 22 years old. Korean. Terrified. His backpack sat on his lap like a shield, new and stiff, bought specifically for this journey. Inside, notebooks still wrapped in plastic, pens tested 3 times before packing, a Korean English-Tagalog phrasebook he'd studied on the plane but could barely remember now, and a small plastic container of his mother's homemade kimchi that had somehow survived customs. His knuckles were white from gripping the bag so tightly. Through the smudged window, Manila revealed itself in fragments that made no sense together. Street vendors arranged mangoes in perfect pyramids, shouting prices in a musical rhythm he couldn't decipher. Motorcycles with entire families balanced on them. Father driving, mother holding a baby, toddler sandwiched between. Weaved through traffic with a confidence that made Minho's stomach clench. School children in uniforms walked arm in arm, laughing at jokes he'd never understand. Everything moved, everything shouted, everything demanded attention. In Seoul, traffic was orderly. People were quiet. Space was respected. Here, chaos seemed to be the organizing principle. UST, University of Santo Tomas. Baba na! The driver shouted, his voice cutting through the engine noise and passenger chatter. Minho's heart jumped into his throat. He recognized those letters, UST. His stop, his new life, the point of no return. Excuse me, he mumbled in English, standing awkwardly in the cramped space. Sorry. Excuse me. A teenage girl moved her legs slightly. An old woman shifted her bags. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody seemed to actually hear him. He squeezed past knees and elbows, his backpack bumping shoulders, drawing annoyed glances but no words. When his feet finally hit the pavement, the jeepney pulled away immediately, leaving him standing in a cloud of exhaust and the overwhelming noise of España Boulevard. And then there was silence. Not actual silence. The street still roared with traffic, vendors still called out, students still laughed. But the silence of being completely, utterly alone in a crowd. The University of Santo Tomas gates rose before him like something from a postcard his mother would send. Massive iron bars painted black, weathered stone archways that had stood for centuries, and beyond them, a flood of students moving with the kind of certainty that only comes from belonging. They walked in clusters, pairs, groups, arms linked, phones out, voices overlapping in Tagalog and English, and that strange mixture of both that Minho had heard on the jeepney. Nobody walked alone. Except him. Minho pulled out his phone with shaking hands, his thumb moving automatically to his photo gallery. There it was, the last picture taken on Philippine soil, well, technically Korean soil, but the last picture before the journey. Incheon International Airport 6 months ago, though it felt like 6 years. His mother stood beside him in the photo, her hands firm on his shoulders, her smile wide but her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall in public. She wore the blue hanbok she saved for special occasions, and she'd insisted on the photo even though Minho had protested that they looked too formal, too dramatic. Minho, she'd said, gripping his face between her palms. Non ungame. Pilipineso 새로운 시작이야. 엄마는 항상 내 편이야. Minho, you are brave. This is a new beginning in the Philippines. Mom is always on your side. 무서워 엄마, he'd whispered. I'm scared, Mom. 두려움은 용기를 배우는 시작이야, she'd replied, tears finally escaping down her cheeks. Fear is the beginning of learning courage. Now, standing before these gates 8,000 miles from that airport, Minho wondered if his mother had been wrong. Fear didn't feel like the beginning of courage. It felt like a stone in his chest, heavy and cold, making it hard to breathe. But he'd come this far. He locked his phone, slipped it into his pocket, and took a breath that tasted of exhaust fumes and street food and something floral he couldn't identify. Then he walked through the gates. The campus sprawled before him like a small city. Spanish colonial buildings with their terracotta roofs and cream-colored walls stood alongside brutalist concrete structures from the 1970s, creating a timeline in architecture. Ancient acacia trees stretched their gnarled branches overhead, offering patches of shade where students gathered in clusters. Everywhere, voices overlapped, Tagalog flowing like water, English cutting through in sharp bursts, laughter erupting from corners, footsteps echoing on stone pathways worn smooth by generations of feet. Minho walked slowly, his eyes darting between his crumpled class schedule and the building numbers that seemed to follow no logical order. Room B205, Introduction to Philippine Studies, Professor Maria Santos, 8 a.m. He checked his watch. 7:52. 8 minutes to find a building he'd never seen in a campus that felt like a labyrinth designed to confuse him specifically. A campus map glowed on his phone screen, but it made no sense now that he was actually here. The buildings didn't match their digital representations. Or maybe he was reading it wrong. Or maybe he was turned around. Everything looked the same and completely different all at once. A group of 4 Filipino students swept past him, their conversation animated and completely incomprehensible. One of them, tall, athletic, wearing a basketball jersey, gestured widely while talking and his elbow bumped Minho's shoulder. Not hard, just enough to remind Minho that he was in the way. The student didn't turn around, didn't apologize, didn't even seem to notice. He just kept walking, absorbed in whatever story he was telling. His friends laughing at the punchline Minho would never understand. Minho stopped walking. Students continued to flow around him like a river around a stone. Some rushing to class with the frantic energy of people running late. Others strolling leisurely, earbuds in, lost in their own worlds. A few calling out to friends across the pathway, "Tara na, wait for me." Voices full of the casual intimacy of people who knew they belonged. But none of them saw him. Not really. He was just another obstacle to navigate around. Another body taking up space. Another face in a crowd of thousands. Standing there in the middle of the pathway, backpack clutched to his chest like armor, Minho felt the weight of it all. The 6 months of preparation. Language lessons that now felt useless, cultural research that bore no resemblance to reality. Promises made to his mother and himself about becoming someone new, someone braver, someone who could thrive anywhere. The money his parents had saved, working extra shifts, cutting corners, investing in this dream of international education. The friends he'd left behind in Seoul, the girlfriend who'd broken up with him rather than try long distance, the small room in his family's apartment that his younger sister had already claimed. He'd burned his bridges to get here. And now, standing invisible in the middle of this unfamiliar campus, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. "Move along. You're blocking the path." A security guard waved at him impatiently. Minho jerked into motion, mumbling another apology nobody heard, and somehow, whether by luck or instinct, his feet carried him toward a large colonial building with a sign that read Main Hall. The stairs were worn, dipping slightly in the center from countless footsteps. He climbed them slowly, checking room numbers. B201, B203, B205. There it was. His classroom. His new beginning. The place where he was supposed to transform from invisible foreigner into successful international student. Through the small window in the door, he could see students already seated. The professor hadn't arrived yet, which meant he wasn't late, but everyone else was already comfortable. They sat in clusters, friends who'd clearly chosen seats together, voices overlapping as they discussed homework or weekend plans or whatever people who belonged talked about. Minho's hand trembled on the door handle. In Korea, he'd never been the nervous type. He'd been confident, even popular, good grades, good friends, good enough at basketball to make the university team. But that had been in a world where he understood the rules, spoke the language fluently, knew what was expected. Here, he was starting over from zero. Less than zero. Negative numbers on a scale he didn't even know how to read. He took 3 deep breaths, the way his mother had taught him before piano recitals when he was young. Then he pushed the door open. The door creaked. Every head turned. Complete, total silence. 30 pairs of eyes locked onto him, and Minho felt his face burn with heat that had nothing to do with Manila's climate. He froze in the doorway, his hand still on the handle, seriously considering turning around and walking straight to the airport. The classroom was larger than he'd expected. Old wooden desks arranged in rows, High ceilings with old fans spinning slowly, large windows letting in streams of golden morning sunlight that illuminated dust motes floating in the air. Posters covered the walls, Philippine heroes, historical timelines, a large map of the archipelago with its 7,000 islands. Sino Sia? Someone whispered in Tagalog. Who's that? Bago Yata, another voice responded. Must be new. Korean Kaya? Is he Korean? Minho didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Curiosity mixed with the kind of assessment that happens when something unfamiliar enters a familiar space. He was the zoo animal, the thing that didn't belong. He walked quickly to an empty seat at the back, his footsteps echoing too loudly on the worn floor. His chair scraped against the ground as he pulled it out, the sound making him wince. More heads turned. He sat down and immediately made himself as small as possible, unzipping his backpack slowly, carefully, trying not to make any more noise. He pulled out a notebook, pristine, never used, and a pen, placed them on the desk with precision, then had no idea what to do with his hands. In his lap, on the desk, should he look up, look down, make eye contact with someone? The other students gradually returned to their conversations, but Minho could feel occasional glances in his direction like little pinpricks of attention. Two girls sitting 2 rows ahead whispered to each other, stealing glances back at him. Cute naman. One of them giggled softly. He's cute though. Una, parang K-drama actor, her friend agreed. Yeah, like a K-drama actor. More giggling. Minho kept his eyes fixed on his blank notebook, his face burning hotter. He didn't understand the words, but the giggling was universal. Were they laughing at him? With him? About him? The minutes crawled by like hours. Then the door opened again, and this time, everyone's attention shifted. Professor Maria Santos entered, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a traditional Filipino barong Tagalog over modern slacks. She carried a worn leather bag that looked like it had been with her for decades and a stack of papers that threatened to slide from her arms. Good morning, class. Her voice was warm but commanded attention. Good morning, Professor Santos. The class responded in unison, a ritual Minho hadn't known to expect. The professor set her things on the desk and looked around the room with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to take in every detail. Her gaze landed on Minho, and she paused, just for a moment, before her face broke into a genuinely warm smile. Well, she said, her English clear and precise, I see we have a new face today. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself to the class? Minho's heart stopped. Actually stopped. He was going to die. Right here in this classroom on his first day 8,000 miles from home. Don't be shy, Professor Santos encouraged gently. We're all friends here. Slowly, like a man walking to his execution, Minho stood. Every eye in the room was on him again. The girls who'd been giggling, the guy who'd bumped into him, students he'd never met and might never speak to, all watching, all waiting. Hello, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat, tried again. Hello, my name is Kim Minho. I am from South Korea. I am exchange student. I will study here 1 year. Thank you. The words came out stilted, awkward, his accent thick and his grammar questionable. In his head, he'd practiced this introduction 100 times. In his head, it had sounded confident, friendly, articulate. In reality, it sounded like exactly what it was. A terrified foreigner trying desperately not to embarrass himself and failing. He sat down quickly, before anyone could ask questions, before he could say anything else wrong. Silence hung in the air for a beat too long. Then Professor Santos, bless her, jumped in smoothly. Welcome to the Philippines, Minho. We're very happy to have you here at UST. This is Introduction to Philippine Studies, and I promise you'll learn a great deal about our beautiful country. Don't worry. Everyone in this class will help you feel at home. Won't you, class? Murmured agreement. A few nods. The girls who'd been giggling earlier smiled at him encouragingly. Now, Professor Santos continued, pulling everyone's attention back to the front. Today we're going to discuss one of the most fundamental concepts in Filipino culture, Bayanihan. Can anyone tell our new friend Minho what Bayanihan means? A girl in the second row, confident, well-spoken, with glasses and a neat ponytail, raised her hand immediately. Yes, Isabel? Bayanihan is the Filipino tradition of communal unity and cooperation, Isabel said clearly, her English perfect and unaccented. It comes from the word bayan, which means nation or community. It's the idea that we're stronger together, that we help each other, especially during difficult times. The traditional image is of neighbors literally carrying someone's house, bamboo and all, to a new location, everyone working together to help. Excellent summary, Professor Santos said. And can anyone give a modern example of Bayanihan? A tall guy in a basketball jersey, the same one who'd bumped into Minho earlier, raised his hand. Carlo? Like when there's a typhoon, Carlo said. And everyone helps clean up afterward. Or when someone's sick and the neighbors bring food. Or even just, I don't know, helping a classmate who's struggling with homework. Perfect examples. The professor nodded. Bayanihan isn't just about big dramatic gestures. It's woven into daily life. It's about seeing someone who needs help and offering it without being asked. It's about community over individualism. She wrote the word on the blackboard in large letters. Bayanihan. This concept might seem foreign to some of you, especially to our international students. She glanced at Minho with a kind smile. Because many cultures, particularly in East Asia and the West, emphasize individual achievement and self-reliance. But here in the Philippines, we believe that no one succeeds alone. We believe in lifting each other up. Minho listened, trying to absorb both the English words and the cultural concept. In Korea, they had similar ideas, jeepney, collectivism, the importance of the group. But it manifested differently. In Korea, the group was often your family, your company, your school, defined, bounded entities. Here, Bayanihan seemed more fluid, more open. The lecture continued, moving through Filipino values. Haya, shame/propriety. Utang na loob, debt of gratitude. Pakikasama, getting along with others. Professor Santos was an engaging teacher, mixing historical context with personal anecdotes and asking questions that made students think. But Minho barely absorbed any of it. He was too busy being hyper-aware of his own presence, of the occasional glances from other students, of his foreignness that felt like it was written across his forehead in neon letters. When class finally ended 90 minutes later, students immediately erupted into conversation and movement. Minho packed his things slowly, giving everyone time to leave so he wouldn't have to navigate the awkward hallway small talk he couldn't participate in. Excuse me? He looked up. Isabel, the girl who'd answered the question about Bayanihan, stood beside his desk, smiling in a way that seemed genuine rather than polite. Hi, she said. You're Minho, right? He nodded, caught off guard by the direct approach. I'm Isabel. Welcome to UST. She spoke slowly, clearly, as if she'd dealt with language barriers before. How are you finding everything so far? Minho's brain scrambled for English words. It is very big. And many people. I am still learning. I bet, Isabel said sympathetically. The campus is huge. I got lost at least 3 times on my first day, and I'm from here. Where's your next class? Minho pulled out his crumpled schedule. Philippine history. Room C304. Isabel's face lit up. Oh, that's Professor Reyes. I have that class too. Come on. I'll show you where it is. And just like that, without asking permission or waiting for confirmation, Isabel launched into friendly conversation as they walked. She talked about the campus layout, recommended places to eat lunch, warned him about which water fountains didn't work, pointed out the fastest routes between buildings. Minho followed along, understanding maybe 60% of what she said, but grateful beyond words for the kindness. In Korea, strangers didn't usually approach like this. There would be more formality, more distance, more waiting for proper introductions. Here, apparently, friendliness was just the default setting. They reached the next classroom, C304, Philippine history, and Isabel waved to a group of students already inside. Guys, this is Minho. He's an exchange student from Korea, she announced without preamble. 3 faces turned toward him, 2 guys and another girl. Yo, welcome, one of the guys said, tall and athletic, wearing the same basketball jersey from earlier. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Oh wait, I think I bumped into you this morning. Sorry about that, man. I'm Carlo." "Miguel," said the other guy, shorter but with an infectious grin. "Jasmine," the girl added, giving a little wave. "Hi," Minho managed. "Nice to meet you. Dude, you're the first Korean exchange student we've had in like forever," Miguel said enthusiastically. "Most international students are from other Asian countries or Spain. This is cool. Do you know Korean? Like, can you teach us some words?" Jasmine asked excitedly. Before Minho could answer, Professor Reyes entered. An older man, perhaps in his 60s, with stern features but kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Settle down," he said, and the class immediately quieted. "Today we'll be discussing the Spanish colonial period, specifically the galleon trade and its impact on Philippine society." The lecture began, and Minho tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting back to the interaction with Isabel and her friends. They'd been so casual, so welcoming. In Korea, it would have taken weeks to develop that kind of easy rapport with classmates. There would have been careful feeling out of social hierarchies, formal language, gradual warming. Here, these students had simply decided he was part of the group, and that was that. When class ended an hour and a half later, Miguel turned around in his seat. He'd been sitting directly in front of Minho, and asked, "Hey, it's lunchtime. You want to eat with us?" Minho hesitated. He'd packed a sandwich, planning to eat alone somewhere quiet. But Isabel was already standing, gathering her things. "Come on," she said. "You need to try the cafeteria food. It's not great, but it's an essential part of the UST experience." "There's also the quadrangle," Carlo added. "Food stalls outside. Way better than the cafeteria." "Oh yeah, fish balls," Jasmine said enthusiastically. "Have you tried fish balls yet, Minho?" Fish balls. The English confused him. Balls made of fish? "Street food," Miguel explained. "You'll see. Come on." And once again, Minho found himself being swept along by the sheer force of Filipino friendliness. They walked as a group through the campus, and Minho noticed something he hadn't earlier. Students everywhere seemed to move in packs like this. Pairs, trios, groups of 5 or 6, arms linked or hands on shoulders, talking over each other in a constant stream of chatter. Nobody walked alone. The quadrangle was an open courtyard surrounded by buildings, with food stalls lining one side like a miniature street market. The smell hit Minho first: fried food, sweet sauce, grilled meat, something vinegar-based he couldn't identify. Students crowded around the stalls, shouting orders, laughing, eating while standing. "Best fish balls are from Manong Rosa," Carlo declared, leading them to a specific stall where an older woman was frying perfectly round balls of something in hot oil. "Ilang stick?" she asked in Tagalog. "How many sticks?" "Lima. Extra sauce ha," Carlo responded. "5. Extra sauce." The vendor handed him a stick with 5 fish balls speared on it, and he immediately dunked them in a container of dark sauce. "Your turn," Isabel said to Minho. "Just tell her how many sticks you want." Minho stared at the fish balls. Honestly, they looked kind of gray and unappetizing, but everyone was watching him expectantly. "1 stick," he said hesitantly to the vendor. "Isa lang?" she confirmed, holding up one finger. "Yes, 1." She handed him the stick, and Miguel immediately grabbed his arm and guided it toward the sauce containers. "Okay, so you have 2 choices," Miguel explained like a tour guide. "Sweet sauce or spicy sauce. Sweet is more like ketchup-based, and spicy is, well, spicy. Try sweet first." Minho dipped 1 fish ball tentatively in the sweet sauce and took a small bite. His eyes widened. It was actually really good, savory, slightly chewy, the sauce adding sweetness and tang. Nothing like anything he'd eaten in Korea, but definitely not bad. "Good?" Isabel asked, grinning at his expression. "Good," Minho confirmed, taking another bite. "Now try spicy," Jasmine urged. He dipped the next fishball in the red sauce and bit into it. Fire exploded in his mouth. His eyes watered. His face turned red. He gasped, making a sound that wasn't quite a word. The group burst into laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of laughter that comes from shared experience. Too much? Carlo asked, still chuckling, and handed him a bottle of water. Minho gulped it down, coughing slightly. Very, very spicy. You get used to it, Miguel said. Filipinos put chili on everything. Even fruit sometimes. Fruit. Minho's watering eyes widened further. Green mango with bagoong, Jasmine explained. You'll try it eventually. They found a spot under one of the acacia trees and sat on the grass in a circle, eating their fish balls and other snacks they'd bought. Kwek-kwek, orange-battered quail eggs, banana Q, caramelized fried bananas on sticks, and buko juice in plastic bags with straws. So what made you choose Philippines? Isabel asked, delicately biting into her banana Q. Most Korean exchange students go to America or Europe, right? Minho had to think about how to answer in English. I want different experience, not just study English. I want to understand different culture, different way to think about world. That's actually really mature, Miguel said, sounding impressed. Most people just want to go to famous places so they can brag about it. Also, Minho added honestly, cheaper than America or Europe. My family, we don't have much money. Philippines is good program, good university, but cheaper. He worried this might sound offensive, but Carlo just nodded. Hey, that's practical. Nothing wrong with that. UST is old and respected, like really old. Founded in 1611. One of the oldest universities in Asia. Older than Harvard, Jasmine added proudly. They continued talking, and Minho found himself relaxing incrementally. The conversation flowed around him, sometimes in English for his benefit, sometimes slipping into Tagalog when they forgot, but they always circled back to include him. Okay, seriously though, Miguel said suddenly, you have to teach us some Korean, at least the basics. Okay, Minho agreed. What you want to learn? How do you say hello? Jasmine asked. Annyeonghaseyo. Annyeonghaseyo. They all attempted to repeat it, their pronunciations hilariously wrong, and Minho found himself laughing. Actually laughing, for the first time since he'd arrived in Manila. How about thank you? Isabel asked. 감사합니다. Gamasehamenida. More butchered attempts. More laughter. How do you say you're cute? Jasmine asked with a mischievous grin, and the others immediately started teasing her. Minho felt his face heat up, but he answered anyway. 귀엽다. GWI but is for children or animals. For person, maybe 예쁘다, 예쁘다 means pretty. Ormadita, miatita, means cool or handsome. Ooh, language lesson, Carlo said. Okay. Teach us something useful. How do you say, I'm hungry? Begupa, begopa, begopa. They all chorused, and Minho had to correct their pronunciation 3 times. The lunch hour passed quickly, filled with language lessons and laughter, and Minho slowly feeling like maybe this wouldn't be the disaster he'd feared. When they finally had to leave for afternoon classes, Isabel turned to him and said, Hey, we usually study together in the library on Wednesdays after class. You should come. Library, Minho repeated. Yeah, the main library. We can show you where it is. We have a group project coming up for Professor Reyes's class, and you'll probably be assigned to a group too. Oh, okay. Thank you. No problem. She smiled warmly. That's what friends are for, right? Friends. The word echoed in Minho's head as he walked to his next class alone. A math course where he didn't know anyone. Friends. In Korea, friendship was earned over time, built slowly through shared experiences and carefully navigated social hierarchies. You didn't just become friends with someone in a few hours. But apparently, here you did. The afternoon dragged on. Math class was taught entirely in English, which Minho could follow reasonably well since math was math in any language. He sat alone again, but this time it didn't feel quite as suffocating. He had a group to meet in the library on Wednesday. He had people who'd said, see you tomorrow, when they'd parted ways after lunch. It was something. It was a start. When classes finally ended at 4 p.m., Minho navigated his way back through the campus, still getting turned around twice but eventually finding his way to the jeepney stop on España Boulevard. This time, Getting on the jeepney felt slightly less terrifying. He knew the route now. He knew where to get off. Back in his small dorm room, barely larger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a desk, a tiny closet, and a window that overlooked a busy street. Minho sat down heavily and pulled out his phone. 7 missed messages from his mother. 엄마, 잘 도착했니? Did you arrive safely? 엄마, 첫날은 어땠어? How was your first day? 엄마, 민호야, 답장 좀 해줘. 걱정된다. Minho, please reply. I'm worried. 엄마, 괜찮은 거지? You're okay, right? 엄마, 밥은 먹었어? Did you eat? 엄마, 친구는 사귀었니? Did you make any friends? 엄마, 전화 줄 수 있어? Can you call me? Guilt washed over him. He'd been so caught up in surviving the day that he hadn't thought to update her. He hit the video call button, and she answered on the first ring. Minho. Her face filled the screen, and Minho felt his throat tighten with homesickness. Hi, 엄마. 어떻게 지내? 첫날은 괜찮았어? How are you? Was your first day okay? It was scary, he admitted in Korean, finding it easier to be honest in his native language. Everything is so different. The campus is huge. Everyone speaks Tagalog or English, and I felt lost most of the time. His mother's face creased with concern. But you're okay? You're safe. Yes, I'm safe. And I met some people, Filipino students. They were really nice to me. They invited me to eat lunch with them and taught me about Filipino food. His mother's expression softened. See? I told you. People are kind everywhere. You just have to give them a chance. They were so friendly, Emma. Like, immediately friendly. No waiting, no formality. They just decided we were friends. That sounds wonderful. It's different from Korea. Everything is different. Different isn't bad, Minho. Different is just different. You'll learn to adapt. They talked for another 20 minutes, and Minho told her about his classes, the jeepney ride, the fishballs, the campus. He told her about Professor Santos and her lesson on Bayanihan. He told her about Isabel, Carlo, Miguel, and Jasmine. I'm proud of you, his mother said when they were about to hang up. I know it's hard, but you're doing it. You're being brave. I don't feel brave. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Remember? It's doing the thing even though you're afraid. You were terrified today, but you went to class anyway. You talked to people anyway. You tried new food anyway. That's courage. After they hung up, Minho sat at his desk and stared out the window. The sun was setting over Manila, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that he'd never seen in Seoul. The traffic below was still chaotic, the noise still overwhelming, the heat still oppressive. But maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. The next few weeks passed in a blur of classes, confusion, small victories, and occasional setbacks. On his second day, Minho got lost trying to find the restroom and ended up in a completely different building before a kind janitor pointed him in the right direction. On his third day, he accidentally ordered food in the cafeteria by pointing at things and ended up with a lunch that included pig intestines, which he ate anyway because he was too embarrassed to waste food. On his fourth day, he successfully navigated the entire campus without getting lost once and felt like he'd climbed Everest. He started to recognize patterns. The campus was organized by building letters A hall, B hall, C hall, and once he understood the system, navigation became easier. He learned which jeepney routes went back to his dorm and which ones would take him to different parts of Manila. He discovered that "pu" and "salamat" were magic words in Tagalog. "Pa" showing respect, "salamat" meaning thank you, and using them made Filipinos smile at him warmly. Isabel, Carlo, Miguel, and Jasmine became his anchors. They included him in their study groups, invited him to lunch every day, patiently corrected his English, and taught him Tagalog phrases, most of which he immediately forgot, but the effort counted. They were loud, affectionate, sometimes overwhelming in their friendliness, but genuine in a way that made Minho's careful Korean reserve seem almost cold by comparison. One Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into the semester, they gathered in the UST main library, a stunning old building with high ceilings, wooden shelves that reached toward the sky, and the smell of old books and air conditioning. They'd claimed their usual table in the back corner, spreading out textbooks and laptops. Professor Reyes had announced a major group project worth 40% of their grade. Research a specific period in Philippine history and present it to the class. And of course, their group had been assigned together: Isabel, Carlo, Miguel, Jasmine, and Minho. Okay, Carlo said, pulling out a notebook. We need to pick a topic. Any ideas? Spanish colonization? Miguel suggested. We could do a deep dive into one of the revolts. Too broad, Isabel countered. We need something specific. What about the Japanese occupation during World War II? There's so much material there. Resistance movements, collaborators, daily life under occupation. That could work, Jasmine said. My Lola, my grandmother, lived through it. I could interview her. They all turned to Minho, who'd been quiet, listening and trying to follow the rapid English conversation. What do you think? Isabel asked gently. Minho had been thinking about something since the discussion started. He'd been hesitant to suggest it, worried it